my radiator is like a life support machine.
It either sounds like that or a really low clock.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well since I have an iron lung connected to myself.
We're live.
Hello, everyone. We'll get started here. We'll wait another minute till 1 o'clock, but thank you for people coming on and joining us, and we'll get started shortly. Thanks again, everyone, for coming on, and we'll wait till the 1 o'clock hour to get started here. And the clock just switched, so it is Tuesday, December 11th. It is 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and this is Advancement Live. I'm your host, Kerry Gotham. On today's live broadcast, we're talking about measuring and reporting impact. How do we know that our alumni programs add value to the alumni we serve? How do we know what programs to keep, start, stop? We use facts and data to manage some of this change and growth, but understanding those metrics, the engagement metrics, can help us answer some of those questions. Today, we're here to help you answer some of those questions and have some hashtag winning ways to report on outcomes, whether it's your boss, whether it's your alumni boards, your foundation boards, or the community. We'll explore some engagement definitions for maybe some of the folks new to the game, but we'll also take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at some techniques of taking that next step in your engagement metrics. Plus, we're going to help you to talk or to really inform you how to use engagement metrics to inform future decisions. Advancement Live is part of the Higher Ed Network and offering you direct access to some of the best and brightest minds in education. We have one of them today, certainly with us. Be a part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using the hashtag HigherEdLive. For those of you who are visual learners, there it is. The good old-fashioned way. Look at that. Hashtag HigherEdLive. We'd love to hear from you and be able to answer some of your questions on there as well. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to our podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsor today, the good folks at SUNY Quad. I actually work at one of the SUNY institutions in the State University of New York. And the SUNY Quad organization is the professional organization that supports SUNY, the largest comprehensive system of higher education in the United States with more than 64 college and university campuses. The SUNY Quad organization supports such disciplines as marketing and communications, alumni engagement, development, donor relations, and advancement services. Thank you to our friends at SUNY Quad for being today's sponsor. And as always, Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. Thanks to the folks at M. Stoner for all the good work they do. Well, let's get started with our presentation here today. And as I said before, don't hesitate to ask any questions using the hashtag HigherEdLive. I'll do my best to get to the questions as they come in. And we learned a little bit about Jennifer, or actually I have to introduce Jennifer. So we have with us, we're very lucky today to have Jennifer Cunningham. She is the Assistant Vice President for Alumni Relations at Lehigh University. Jennifer provides strategy and direction for the ways in which Lehigh engages with its 80,000 plus alumni around the globe. She came to Lehigh in early 2016. She was recently named to the CASE Council of Alumni Relations and serves as a faculty member on the CASE Summer Institute for Alumni Relations. I happen to serve with her in that role, and I will put a little plug in for the CASE Summer Institute. If you want to send your newcomers and people who are new to the profession, it's a great opportunity for them to really dive in and learn from Jennifer and myself. She is in her third year as a faculty member on the Summer Institute. And prior to Lehigh, she worked at her alma mater, Cornell University. Shout out to our friends at Cornell University. She's there for 9 years, and most recently as the Senior Director of Metrics and Marketing, where she analyzed events, volunteer and giving data, and coached staff on using it to make smarter business decisions. Before her career in alumni relations, Jennifer worked in advertising, producing TV and magazine ads for clients including Microsoft, MasterCard, and Popeye's Fried Chicken. Who doesn't like some Popeyes fried chicken on a Tuesday afternoon? Well, no chicken for us, but let's turn it over to Jennifer Cunningham to talk a little bit about metrics today. And Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. And let's start with why metrics? You obviously have a passion for this and you've been around this topic for a while. Why is this so important?
So hi, Carrie, and hi to everybody on the call. Glad to be here. So why metrics? So when I got into this position, or the position at Cornell, I guess it was about probably 7 or 8 years ago, and we were thinking about ways to show the impact of alumni relations. And a lot of people were doing a lot of work on this, but then there were also a lot of people in the industry who said, no, alumni relations, it's more of an art than a science, and you can't measure art and the value of relationships. You can't measure love and loyalty. And I just love data and statistics, and I'm an athlete, and so as an athlete, you're always measured, and you can measure gymnastics and ice skating, those kind of sports. So I sort of took that to heart when we were talking about engagement metrics and how to do this. And I was fortunate to work with Chris Marshall, who is now at Graduate, but was my boss at Cornell. And he'd been working with a lot of other schools chewing on this too. So to make it sound like I invented all of this, I had the idea to begin with. But my job, I was lucky enough to have my job as focused on metrics. And so in thinking about why measuring, the answer that I first came up with, and that was not right, I think, was, well, because we need to show the relationship between engagement and giving. And if people are engaged, how much are they giving? So giving was really the only output that we were thinking about. And that just didn't resonate with a lot of people. And now it doesn't resonate with me either, because there's a lot of things that people give to a university that are not monetary, although that's super, super important. It's not the only thing. And I think when I first started out in this, I was really trying to make the causation between engagement and giving, and it just didn't work. It just wasn't getting traction. So then digging a little bit deeper, thinking about our audience and our alumni and honoring the time and the talent that they give us, and thinking about, like, are we making the most of their time and talent? Does it matter, all this stuff that they're doing? And so I approached it from that way, to think, all right, so people are coming, for example, your alumni association, your board is coming to campus 4 times a year. They're spending all this money of their own and leaving their kids and leaving their jobs and all these things to come. Are they making an impact? And so approaching it from that way and really honoring our alumni and making sure that the time and talent that they were putting into it was actually making a difference for the students, for the university, for the staff, for everybody else. So that, I think, is my why. And the happy consequence of that absolutely leads to giving. There definitely is a correlation there. That the more your volunteers and your attendees and all the people that we touch in alumni relations, the more they feel like they are giving back in the time and talent ways, and the more that they feel that their gifts are helping the students of the university, the bigger impact we can have. And really, when you talk about alumni relations strategy, the definition of strategy really is putting your dollars towards the things that matter the most. So when I'm thinking about budgets and my staff time and staff allocations, I'm thinking about where can I put them so that they have the highest return on investment or return on engagement, not just doing things to do them or because we've always done them, but because they really make an impact. So that's the approach that I'm taking now when I think about engagement metrics.
Great. Thanks for that, Jennifer. I know I'm the director of alumni engagement at the college at Brockport, and I know maybe we should start just to do some definitions or some rudimentary stuff for some of the folks who on the call or on the webinar who may be new to this, and certainly we want to dive a little bit deeper too. And I want to pose a question to you as well, because we often hear that you worked at Cornell and Lehigh, and 2 great shops and lots of support. But how do you do metrics? You don't have the resources if you're in a tiny shop. So maybe a little
Yeah.
101 here, alumni engagement metrics.
Yeah. So there's two parts to that question. I think first I'll do the definitions. So event attendees, anybody who comes to things. And that gets a little funny because often the alumni relations staff, development staff are not the only ones doing events. You've got alumni coming to campus, you've got colleges and units doing their own things, you've got alumni gathering together in ways that you don't even know about. So people sort of let that stop them. Well, if we can't collect everything, why collect anything? And I say just get started. Events are probably the easiest thing to tackle because you have your registration systems and all of that. So just put up a registration system. I'm sure people are using electronic registrations, and just go from there. See what you can do over time, but just start somewhere. And then volunteers. And volunteers is something people are counting a little bit differently. Some people count volunteers that are like appointed positions. They're on a board or a council. Other people count volunteers if you work a registration desk, or you're a social ambassador, or do mock interviews or that kind of thing. So within your own organization, by volunteer. And then giving. And giving is pretty straightforward because the IRS makes us report accurately. So that's also pretty standard. So those are sort of the three standard definitions. And it's what the Case Commission on Engagement Metrics has identified as the three things that most of us can count. So then the other part of that question is, well, what if you're a small shop and it's really hard to get those numbers? For where to start. I don't think getting those three numbers is that difficult. Again, like just starting even with spreadsheets, if that's all you have to start from somewhere. And I get that question a lot where I stand up and, Cornell had, I think, 350 staff members in development and alumni relations. Lehigh has about 115, I think. And I talk to people who are literally one-person shops and they go, oh my gosh, I can't do all of this. And what I say is, well, you can do some, and I will tell you the challenges are different. So when you're trying to navigate and trying to get consensus among 350 people and 115 people versus one person, it's a little bit easier if you're a smaller shop to get consensus among your teammates and to try things and to be more agile. So the struggle is real. But there's just different challenges when you're larger.
The mighty alumni engagement team of 5 people, we gasped when we heard those numbers. Yeah. But I can tell folks from a small shop as 5, and you may be smaller than 5, that we've been doing this for 3 years, and you really have to bite off what you can chew and really collect the data that you're actually going to use, right? And I think you mentioned the case. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit more, the case council.
Yeah, so there was I think it's been 2 years now, where there's a case commission on really trying to standardize these definitions for our industry of what is alumni engagement metrics. And I think there's about 4,000 institutions in case. And so obviously not everything is going to fit for everybody. But the latest draft I saw has pretty broad definitions, even of what is an alum. Some people count postdocs as alumni. Some people count long distance learning. Others only count if you got a degree. Some count if you were on campus for 15 credits. So their definition is pretty broad with the intention that we kind of make it what makes sense for our schools. But that the draft is kind of going around different circles, and they have a few schools that have agreed to work with them to test how this might actually play out. So the theory is there, and they're really trying to figure out how can this work, how can they implement it for the other case members. So it's pretty exciting. Again, it's really, really broad. So some of us that are further along in the metrics journey may find it a little like, well, of course, but I think it's really good for the industry that Case is stepping up and take a bite of the elephant, or whatever that phrase is, So more to come on that from Case.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And also, another thing you talk about with some of the pitfalls, if you will. I wouldn't say pitfalls. I say challenges that we face on campuses. If we're decentralized or you have rogue units that are doing things on their own, kind of what were some strategies that you took into consideration when getting other departments to share that data and do that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I say to the different colleges and units is I'm not looking to control what they do. I really make it clear that I'm not here to run your events or tell you who should be a volunteer. Again, I just want to honor your volunteer and your event attendees' time and talent by putting them into the database so that when we're looking to do, a webinar with the president for all volunteers, or when we're considering awards, or all the, like, we're considering speakers, people for other positions across the university. Just to know who people are is really, really important. And I say here at Lehigh, like, I'm trying to connect the dots between all of these different things, but I can't connect them until I find them. So really just help me find the dots, and then we can talk together about how to connect them. And sometimes it may not make any sense to connect them, and that's okay. But in other cases, we can really help each other. So just keeping the data as the data, not as any other way, nefarious, plan to like take over people's departments or things. And I just find that when you start having conversations with people about that, and you say, well, if I had your data, then I, do run some pretty easy reports for you and show you how many people you've engaged and what their giving is like, and giving them something in return for what is sometimes a kind of painful process to input data depending on your database.
So we've been counting the beans on our campuses, and we have this data, and then we need to report to the boss man or the boss lady or the boards. So let's talk about that a little bit, taking to that next step, because we talked about some of the challenges, and basically we're collecting event data, volunteer data, and giving data, which may seem easily done. But you need to put those systems in place, certainly at your institutions. But now, taking that next step, we've got this bunch of beans. What do we do now?
A bunch of beans.
A hell of beans.
So I think the first step, when I talk about this, phase 0 of creating a metrics program really is finding the dots and inputting the dots and just figuring out your database systems. What are you going to call things? How do you work with your advancement team to put the data in and get the reports out? Like really basic stuff. And then the next step, phase 1, is really just that bean counting. So even knowing how many event attendees did we have, how many volunteers do we have, how many gifts do we get every year, that's phase 1. And that's an important phase, just to even know. I think when I started out at like, people couldn't even tell us how many events we did every year because we weren't inputting everything into the system. So after you count, it's important to have conversations about, the numbers. So at Cornell, we had been doing 2,000 events every year through staff and our volunteers, and it was too many. I mean, we were just looking at the things we wanted to do with staff, all these great ideas and programs. We go to case conferences, we learn, and we hear all these great things, but we're so busy doing what we've always done and just churning these events. And so really looking at, do we want more event attendees? What's happening to all these people once they come to an event? And same thing with volunteers. Volunteer management is hard. Giving volunteers a really worthwhile experience with the stewardship and, again, the impact reporting, it takes a lot of work and a lot of skill. So I would argue that you don't necessarily want more and more and more volunteers. Same thing as you don't want more and more and more events. So analyzing the data that you do collect to say, are we just spinning our wheels? Are we doing too many events? And then take your event attendees. So download 6 months worth of event attendees, see, have any of those event attendees come to something else? Have they become a volunteer? Have they given a gift? Have they done anything else? Or are they just coming to events? And then ask yourself, is an event my end goal? Like, what are you doing for your university or your institution by having that person come to an event? And in my mind, we've come to the conclusion that, coming to an event is great. It really informs people or gets them connected with people. But if that's all they do, that's not really engagement. When you look at one-time event attendees, they're not usually giving, they're not volunteering, they're not giving back in any way. They're not really engaging, they're just attending an event. And so when you look at all your events over time, how many of those events are just getting people there once? So what I've said to my staff, what I think a lot about is, how do I upsell or cross-sell the people that have come to an event? How do I get them to come to something else? How do I get them bringing their friends? How do I get them volunteering? How do I get them talking about Lehigh at their workplace or hiring Lehigh alums? So we've built all these programs outside of events that allow what I call the engagement continuum. So they come to something, they get informed, they get really excited. They might come to another couple things, but then what I really want to do is get them involved. So you've come to something, now how can I involve you? And then once you're involved and once you're a volunteer and once you are giving, once you're really part of the community, not just kind of, dipping in and out, how do I get you invested? And being invested means actually like being the chair of a board or, giving your ultimate gift or leading something or, something like that. So it's really moving the needle with people. And if any of you have worked in development, they sort of have a funnel like that too of, okay, I'm going to call people, set up visits. And if all they do is keep visiting people, they're going to get fired pretty quick. They have to visit someone and then move them along, move the needle. That's how I think about engagement too. And events is like a visit.
So certainly, as the adage goes, less can sometimes mean more.
Yeah.
And I think I know some of the early net promoter scores and engagement scores, perhaps talking to the bosses or the higher ups, let's raise that number and raise that percentage. And certainly our participation levels look better when we add in the events and we add the volunteers. But unless you have a purpose or a meaning behind that, it's not necessarily just raising that score. It's what you're doing with those folks that you're collecting the data on.
Right. And so, it's a joke, but like I could take my entire budget and just hold a huge party in Central Park in New York and just say, okay, all Lehigh alums, come get free beer and pizza. And I could make my engagement, I could get probably 50% of the alums that live close to New York City would probably come to that thing. So on that one metric, I would look really good that I had super high event attendees. But then what? Those people are not really engaged. They're not giving back. They're just enjoying a great party. And I think that's a lot of the things that we do feel like that. That's not to say that there's not a place for the social things, because sometimes the social events mean more to people than, say, a presidential dinner. Depending on what happens at that social event, I could have met my best friend, or I could have met someone that just gave me a job at that social event. I might be new in a city, and now I feel really welcomed because my Cornell club or my Lehigh club welcomed me in. So that's why I advocate for having a nice mix of events and being intentional about what you're planning and why, and not just throwing out those social things, because I think those mean a lot to people. It also, I think a lot of people come to the social things because that's what they want to do. And then again, once they get there and they have a good time, then you can talk to them about coming to the more substantial, content-driven kind of events. But Carrie, you mentioned Net Promoter. That's another good point. And we could even do I think I've actually done a Higher Ed Live on Net Promoter several years ago.
We'll have to dig the archives for that one.
Yeah, it was me and Linda Reed. I can't remember her last name, from Stanford. And JT Forbes talked to, I believe it was Andrew, several years ago. But Net Promoter is a great way to find out if the attendees, how they felt about that event. And it's a post-event survey that you send out after everything to find out, would you come to other things? Would you recommend coming to other things? It's a nice balance to the quantity question.
I do have something I want to go back to, but we just need to do a quick little product or a sponsor shout out to the good folks at SUNY Quad. If you missed this at the beginning of the call, SUNY Quad is a professional organization for the State University System of New York. It's the Council for University Advancement, and we appreciate them sponsoring us here today. They do throw a great conference, a great educational conference. It's going to be in Saratoga, New York in the summertime, June 12th through the 14th. Beautiful time of year to be there. 2019. It's open to publics and private institutions the same. So if you want more information, you can visit sunyquad.org. And again, thank you to our SUNY Quad sponsors. And what I want to go back to, Jennifer, also, just another reminder, use my visual here, very high tech, hashtag Higher Ed Live. If you have any questions, let us know, because we'll certainly be happy to take them. But I want to go back to, you talked about the development side of the house. And I was wondering, with engagement scoring, have you done work with prospect management at all? And how have you kind of tied that in?
That's interesting. I have an email here. We just did, no, but yes. So we just had our campaign launch for Lehigh, $1 billion campaign, and we did 3 events back to back on campus, New York and San Francisco. And we had these big follow-up meetings after every event with all the gift officers who attended, all the engagement officers, anybody else in the department who was interested in the follow-up. And out of those meetings, I mean, so many good things happened after those meetings, with gift officers reaching out, my engagement officers getting meetings, and converting people from event attendees to other things. And our prospect manager took the attendees and put them through a wealth screening. And I haven't even read it yet. The email is in my inbox that she's found a whole bunch of new prospects for the gift officers and for my team. So it's the beginning of what I think is going to be a really fascinating partnership between engagement and prospect research, and how they take engagement and what we are doing here and work it into the research ratings. So maybe in a year, I'll do another one of these and tell you how it went. But I think that's a really under-tapped resource. I think they're under-tapping us in engagement. I think we're under-tapping them in terms of that, like, data, wealth screening kind of data. So.
You took the words right out of my mouth. We'll probably have to do another session on that. So we do have a question that came in, and I'll just read it to you. It's from John Horowitz. Thank you, John.
Hi, John.
We mentioned 3 core areas for alumni engagement: the events, the volunteering, and giving. Are you also tracking digital engagement? And if so, please share a little bit more about this. And if not, why not? So
I look at that as 2 things. There's digital engagement and there's social media. Digital engagement, yes, absolutely. So we have here, we do live streaming and webinars, and we treat those just like we do an analog event, and we do collect registrations, and we do record those as event attendees. We also have a virtual book club, and we code those, and we have a Lehigh Connects, which is on the People Grove platform for matching mentorships, and it's a job board for alumni. And so we count those as well. On the social media side, that's a little trickier. So I would love to. We just don't have the technology here at Lehigh to do that. And I think Case has been wrestling with that too, because not every school has the resources to purchase something like Evertrue or some of the other social listening kind of platforms that would allow you to match up people who are following you and making comments on your social feeds, and then put them into your database. I know there's a bunch of services that work with LinkedIn. But again, even if you have that technology, it doesn't allow you to just download your entire LinkedIn membership and just upload it into your system. So the social media piece is something that I'm wrestling with, as well as I would love to count it. I think it does count. I know that there are a bunch of people more sophisticated than me in terms of data science looking at, do you count somebody just because they followed you? Do you count a like? And I think you've had on this show, you've had a lot of people come in and weigh in on that. And I'm anxious to do that, but have not yet.
Well, thanks, Matt. And then again, thanks, John, for the question. We also have another question here from Ronald Cohen. Ronald, thank you. It's Jennifer's fan club here coming in.
No.
Should every alumni event include a call to action for attendees? And that isn't about attending the next event. That isn't about attending the next event. And if yes, can you give some examples of that?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot, it depends on the event. That's always the cop-out answer. It depends. I'm not sure at every single event that there should be a specific call to action. We have experimented with, like if a faculty member is talking about her research, we will close the event by saying, Dr. So-and-so, would really appreciate your support. Here's how to give, really kind of soft asks. Where I think the follow-up should happen is after the event. So instead of I guess you could do both, like standing up at an event and saying, we really need volunteers to do X, Y, Z, because then you're going to get people that you haven't necessarily handpicked. Versus after the event, you look at the survey comments, you look at people's event attendance history, you look at some of their other engagement, and then figure out, is this somebody I want to ask to be a volunteer? So right now we did an event in Denver probably a month ago, and the engagement officer has phone calls with 6 people from that event who she has identified as people that would be great to help move that network forward and help us with some other things. So I think if it's not at the event itself, if it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't fit in with the kind of vibe of the event, then I wouldn't sacrifice that vibe just to do an ask. But absolutely after every event, there should be some kind of follow-up that, and it could even just be take this survey and tell us what you thought so we can improve on things. But I think there's a lot we could be asking again after the event.
Thanks for that question, Ron, again. Let's go back to something that we talked about at the beginning of the show, talk about selling it to the bosses or the higher ups. What are some strategies if your VP, your director is not buying into the measuring?
Yeah, that's a tough one because there are some sort of old school VPs out there who, I wouldn't say there's not many of them out there that don't think it's important. They just don't prioritize it. Because if you look at a lot of the databases that we have that are pretty old, a lot of them were built, and all the framework was set up in a world where alumni relations did not look at metrics. So even if you've been talking about metrics for 5 years now, a lot of these frameworks were set up like much longer than that. So it's great if you want to look at individuals. I can pull up a screen about any individual at Lehigh and see every single email they've gotten, every event they were invited to, every visit, all the call reports, but I can't easily do that in mass. So that, I think that's where the convincing comes in, is going to your VP to say, how can I get the data that I need? And that's, to me, where it sometimes breaks down. It's not so much that they don't believe in it, it's that they don't believe in it enough to put the resources towards the reporting and the systems that we would need to do our jobs. That said, I think that's why I became such a wizard at Excel, because no matter what kind of database you have, you can extract CSV sheet like files, Excel files, and you can work some real magic with that. So what I did at Cornell in sort of, an agile way was I would look at data, I'd look at a certain piece of data and then go out and talk about that. And then once people bought into that, I'd go back again and then do another stage of it. So kind of slowly chipping away to show, look, I can do this with Excel. And I can get people excited about it. But if you want a push button report so you can see this every day, here's what I need. So it happens kind of slowly just because resources are tight. But I think that's showing them the data that you can show them versus just, I need $1 million to get a new database so I can do this isn't going to work. But showing them what you can and doing it over time, I think, is the way to go.
Thanks for that, Jennifer. And thanks again for the questions, folks. And if you have any questions here, we'll take a few more if we got before we wrap up here. But one of the things that Jennifer and I share in common is our love of craft brew, good old microbrews, especially from the Northeast, our hazy IPAs and some good stouts too as well. But the craft brew is going through a boom right now, and it's hot. And no one really knows the future. What is the future of alumni engagement metrics? It's hot right now. People are at different stages. Some people are just starting. Some people are wondering how to take that next step. In your professional opinion, as the metrics guru here, where is this going to take us? Where is this going to lead for the profession?
I think it's going to normalize. I mean, I think pretty soon metrics are going to be normalized. When I first started talking about this, and I would go like at a case conference or whatever, and I ask people how many of you are doing this, there'd be a few schools. But now when I talk, it's like everybody knows about it and everybody's trying it. They just want to know a lot more about the how to, like the nitty gritty, how do we do this? I think that what we really need is actually from our vendors. So the iModules, the Graduates, People Groves, the vendors that we all use, I think we need them to help us make it easy so that you don't have to be a data scientist, you don't have to be a nerd like you and I are to care about the metrics. I just called you a nerd. I hope you're okay with that.
I take it as a compliment. Thank you for that. I wear it as a badge of honor here to my fellow nerd.
But I think that that's where it's going, is that it has to become easy. And I think there's a huge opportunity with some of these companies to make it easy for us. I would pay a lot more for iModules if they made it really easy to get this data out. And I think that's where Salesforce is trying to go. If we could all just snap our fingers and have a Salesforce solution that took all the data from the surveys, from event attendance, from the wealth screening, from the development side, and put it all into one place, then I think that some real magic would happen. But I think until that happens, we're just kind of cobbling things together. So I think the industry, we want to be where the Salesforce is, but most of us won't get there in the next 10 years. So I think we just have to keep on to our vendors to make this easy and make it accessible. I also wonder, I'd be curious how many schools actually have a data scientist on board in their advancement shops. And I think that is where it should live. Having people that really just study all the data, because we do have a lot of data. It's just all over the place. And to have somebody who could just do their magic with that and start to show us things. I'm really curious how many shops have data scientists on board. And I bet it's not many.
I think, and you raised a good point with that. We're always looking for ways to engage our faculty and get them on board in the advancement arena, whether it's a statistician, data scientist, computer science. You could tap into that network on your campuses to be able to use their expertise. Yeah.
It's one of the things on my list is to try to do that. So I would be interested if anyone's doing that now. Any tips or a position description or anything like that would be great to share.
So we're getting close to the end of our session here today, and I want to turn it over to Jennifer one last time if she has any parting shots or wants to do any wrap up here. Jennifer?
I would just say start. If you haven't started yet, And I always do make a plug for Excel. Again, like no matter how bad your database and how hard the data is to get out, if you can get some of this data out in Excel sheets, there's a lot of magic you can do to even just get started. And I do have a sheet I can send out somehow or send to Aaron maybe of like the top 10 Excel functions that will transform the way that you are able to manipulate data. So I can send that out and get people started if that's helpful.
We certainly can get that out, and we could get that out on the, we'll put that out on Twitter as well, and we can put it up on the site, I believe, as well. But we'll get access to folks who are watching here today. She is Jennifer Gunningham at Lehigh University. She likes craft brew. She's a nerd. I'm a nerd. I like craft brew. I'm Kerry Gotham from the College at Brockport. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you to our sponsor, SUNY Quad, and thanks to the good folks at M. Stoner for joining us here today. We'll hope you tune in live with episodes coming down in the future. And also, just so you know, if you have colleagues or friends or folks that did not get a chance to see this, it will be up on the Higher Ed Live website as well, and up there as well. So again, I'm Kerry Gotham signing off. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Bye.